Hi there, I'm Clown Car Cats, or just Cats. I main Sadako in Dead by Daylight. I've been playing DBD for almost 2 years now, and I've been maining Sadako for the entirety of that. A few months ago, I made a video talking about Sadako's power and how I play her. I went over how I make use of her power and why I think it's the most effective way for me to play her. Think of that video as an old journal entry, and now a few months later I'm updating with a new journal entry on everything that's changed for me as a Sadako main. I'm gonna go over how my playstyle and approach to the killer role has changed. With all that laid out, let's go ahead and get started. First off, I'm gonna go over why I haven't made any Sadako videos for about 4 months now. Well, the simple answer to that is I kinda took a break from playing Sadako. But why? Well, there's multiple reasons. The first one being events. I can go into the reasons for why Sadako isn't fun to play in events compared to other killers in this game, but I think most people already know about the whole chess debacle with characters like Sadako and Xenomorph and other killers with some form of prop on the map. This affected the Bone Chill event, since the event offering now spawned in an extra chest, but the Haunted by Daylight event didn't have this issue. But it did have the Void, which was a massive safe zone from Condemn, which just made Sadako feel a lot less impactful. And while the events are split into separate queues, I think everyone knows that the separate queues cause the player base to just feel more sweaty. It very well may just be a mental thing, but that's just how it always feels. And to be honest, both events back to back, I just kinda started feeling burned out. Haunted and Bone Chill happened in pretty quick succession, so I just kinda took a soft break from Killer from late October till early January. I call it a soft break because I still played, but I stuck more to Variety Killer and just focused on finishing up some of my last Killer achievements. Mainly Man Behind the Bush, because that one takes a while. Side note, I now have the game 100%ed, have all the achievements, it's pretty cool. With the Bone Chill event coming to an end, I was fired up and ready to jump in and play Sadako again. However, my time away spent playing Survivor and grinding killer achievements had sort of got my head out of the sand on something. You see, when you pretty much exclusively play one killer, you can find yourself in a bit of a bubble in more ways than you'd expect. I'm glad that I took this break because it let me see some problem areas in my gameplay that resulted in some pain points. First up, let's cover the dumb one, but the one that I kinda have to admit. I lose a lot with Sadako. That's kind of an embarrassing thing to admit, but yeah, I'd say I lose or tie about 50% of the time when playing her. Now, I guess that's not too radical a thing to admit. When I asked my friends who play Killer, most of them said they win maybe 60% of their games, with some outliers, of course. The difference with Sadako is when I lose, I lose. I mean, I'm getting 4 outed with maybe 2 hook stages. I was used to this beforehand. Sadako is basically the only killer I play, so this was just how killer goes in my eyes. But when I started grinding killer achievements, I really noticed how different my wins and losses felt. I'm going to be using Michael Myers as the primary example here, as due to the Man Behind the Bush achievement being such a massive grind, he's the killer I've played the most in recent memory other than Sadako. In order to get the achievement, which requires you to tier up with your power 300 times, I ran an obsession swapping build with stock add-ons that increased the stock rate overall and on the obsession specifically. Keep in mind, this build has no gen slowdown, it's pure and chase. With this build, I was winning probably 70 to 80% of my matches, depending on when I was playing. Not only that, but when I lost, it was usually a much closer loss. Usually I felt like I had a chance right up until the end, and my loss was usually due to a clear choice or mistake that I made which set me on the path to losing. versus my losses with Sadako, where it tends to just feel like 6 minutes of attempting to swim through a tsunami. There weren't mistakes or choices I made that I could point to. It's just right from the get-go, this is feeling like a match I'm gonna lose. This really confused me. Myers isn't a good killer, even after his rework. In fact, most serious tier lists put him even lower than Sadako, who is considered by most to be at least C tier. So, why was I performing so much better in my wins and losses with a worse killer that I barely played prior to a couple months ago, versus my main, who I've been playing for almost 2 years now? Now, you could call it a skill issue, and I do obviously think there are many areas I still need to improve in, but I think a lot of it comes down to playstyle and the personal rules that I've come to place upon myself. Let me explain. I played a very condemn-heavy playstyle with Sadako. I didn't intentionally go for hooks. I rather chose to focus on managing my TVs and full condemning survivors. Additionally, I had a personal bias against running slowdown perks, so my usual condemn build consisted of chase and info perks. What this led to was very feast or famine gameplay. Either A, I get a good map for condemn spread, such as the game, Dead Dog Saloon, or Midwich, or even some of the new Ormond variants in my experience. In this case, survivors would get condemned quickly, wouldn't get gens done, I would full condemn them, and then remove them from the game at a breakneck pace. Situation B, I would get a map like Fractured Cowshed, Disturbed Ward, or Mother's Dwelling. I wouldn't spread condemn due to the larger map, and survivors were able to hammer out gens. I wouldn't get any pressure, and I would get 4-man outed. Ignoring the obvious map dependency of this playstyle when you don't run gen slowdown perks, this just isn't a satisfying way to win games. I feel like I'm just running through a routine, and the outcome is decided before my first TP. Either I get a good map in 4K, or I get a bad map and get 4 outed. Relying on condemn caused me to be detached from the outcome of my matches. This playstyle had lost its spark and gave me no engagement as killer. Playing friggin' Michael Myers of all characters helped me see that. See that I was getting conned, playing my main in a way that I simply didn't find enjoyable. But I was very attached to the condemn playstyle, and didn't want to give it up. I wanted to make it work, even to my detriment as a player. Why was this? Well, it circles back to why I play Sadako in the first place. I've said before, but Ringu is my favorite horror movie. I didn't buy DBD because I heard it had a Ringu chapter. I got DBD because my friends played it. I didn't know Sadako was a killer in the game. The first time I scrolled through the killer roster, I frickin' lost my mind. I immediately bought the DLC and decided that this was going to be my main game for the foreseeable future. I started playing Sadako with a preconceived notion of how the character should function, based on my experiences with her pre-existing media. Sadako is a character who haunts her victims over a set period of time. They can't run from her or fight her, they either figure out how to break the curse, or they die. So, this is the character I imagined playing as when I first found out she was in the game. Before we go further, I want to give an example with another more popular character. Let's again circle back to Myers. I think the Tombstone add-ons were a very intentional inclusion by Behavior, and it is also very intentional that they are still in the game after 8 years. If you're somebody who got into DBD because you were a fan of the Halloween movies and heard you could play as Michael Myers, then you probably booted up the game with your freshly purchased Halloween DLC and found out that as killer you have to hook a survivor 3 times to kill them. You probably thought, that's dumb, I'm playing as Michael Myers, why can't I just stab them? Taking this perspective, I think the Tombstone add-ons are important for people who want to feel like Michael Myers. Since Myers is such an iconic character, Behavior wanted to provide people with that experience, and 8 years later, don't want to take that away. Sadako is in a similar place. When she shows up at the end of your 7 days, you don't get to run away or fight her. She just stares at you, and then you die. You didn't break the curse, so now your heart stops, plain and simple. This is the identity Sadako has as a character, so when bringing her to Dead by Daylight, she needed a way to kill survivors outright, so that her identity would be retained. behavior did this, in the form of Sadako's unique status effect, Condemn. Sadako haunts you in the trials. You catch glimpses of her as she flickers in and out of sight, crawling out of TVs. You have to manage her curse by delivering tapes across the map, and the tension rises as your meter fills, crescendoing when you hit 7 stacks, and all of a sudden she's in your face, inescapable, and then you die. Your heart simply stops. I fell in love with this aspect of her as a killer. I didn't really watch DBD content when I first picked up the game, so I didn't know about the Condemn playstyle that V1 Sadako was notorious for. Despite that, I still kind of figured it out in my own way. I ran ring drawing and eerie tape and ran around slugging people for Condemn kills. I felt like a genius, that I'd cracked this game open, that I'd found a way to kill survivors without hooking them. I thought that was really cool and made her very appealing to play because it made me feel like Sadako. Overall, Sadako's Mori is just very satisfying to me compared to the other killer base kit Moris. Myers' Mori, though really funny, just feels kinda cheap if you run it for more than one game. Additionally, it's not a part of the base kit, and you have to bring a specific add-on, which detracts from it feeling like part of his core identity. Pyramid Head's Mori is rad as hell, but you need the survivor to be on Death Hook to perform it, so it more so just feels like a reward for playing the game normally. Pigs isn't even really a Mori in my opinion, since you're just so detached from it. It doesn't feel like I'm Moriing a survivor, it just feels like they got unlucky. Speaking of luck, Vecna's is entirely reliant on RNG on top of requiring hook states like Pyramid Heads, causing it to feel even more detached from the character's identity. Sadako's Mori stands alone and feels special, in that it's a reward for playing the character uniquely. It circumvents the normal gameplay of hooking survivors and feels like an accurate representation of the character. As such, I hope you can see why, to someone who loves the movies, dropping a playstyle centered around remaining faithful to them was a really big mental barrier for me. I didn't want to leave that behind, because to me, that feels like betraying this character I've connected with. I can understand why this seems silly to some, but I really love this character. Her movies, her books, everything. Leaving behind a playstyle that lets me feel like the character portrayed in those was frustrating and sad. However, it just wasn't working anymore. I had to accept that. I'd rather play Sadako in a way that's not as faithful to the character in the books and movies I love than continue playing her in a way that just leaves me drained and disengaged from my matches. So, even though it felt like pulling teeth, I started chasing survivors. I started going for hooks. I started playing her like how you just play killer, I guess. I know this is gonna sound really obvious and make me look kinda dumb, but I recently had the revelation that when you focus on getting downs and hooks, you generate a lot more pressure and tend to win more of your games. Looking back, I really think I'd trapped myself in this mentality that the way I'd settled into playing Sadako was the best and only way for me to play her. It was faithful to the character, and that warped itself in my brain into being her only viable playstyle. Because of this, I'd also locked myself into a singular build. Brutal Strength, Bamboozle, Hexface the Darkness, and Lethal Pursuer. I had a short list of perks that I would occasionally substitute in, but like 90% of my matches used this build. And for add-ons, I had even less variety. I would only ever run Bloody Fingernails and Videotape Copy, cause those are just the best add-ons. So one framework for a build that hardly ever changes, and 2 add-ons that are exclusively run. As you may expect, this was really stale. I just didn't know anything else, so I never realized it. But now I've got over 100 killer perks to start trying out on Sadako, and a whole host of add-ons to try and squeeze value out of. Now that I actually interact with survivors like a normal killer, I've found myself running less info perks and leaning more into perks that promote chase or hit and run depending on my mood. I've been shuffling up my add-on choices too. While I will say I still think Bloody Fingernails and Videotape Copy are the 2 best add-ons that get the most consistent value, I no longer feel the pressure to always bring the quote-unquote best stuff, so I feel more free to experiment with add-ons that support different playstyles, such as a new favorite combo of mine, the Old Newspaper and Mother's Mirror, to lean heavily into a mind game heavy playstyle by being super tricky at loops after you manifest. But did this work? Has anything changed? Well, since I've started playing Sadako in a more traditional manner, I've seen an almost immediate improvement. I've started winning matches that previously I would have just gotten stomped. Even on larger maps that I would have seen as a death sentence on loading in before. Plus, the games are just a lot more fun. There's much more going on for me, and I have a lot more interactions with the survivors. And I think that's really important in DBD. I mean, human interactions are really cool. It's what sets multiplayer games apart from single-player games. Previously, I would have matches where I'd only chase a survivor once, and that was to kill them. I'm much more invested in my matches, and I'm winning them more too. Sadako isn't map dependent for me anymore. I mean, she still might be, but the point is I'm not going to bother telling myself that, because that doesn't help me win matches or help me have more fun. I'm not going to let stuff like map dependency or events screw over my main anymore. If something like that affects Sadako, that just means it's time to adapt to a playstyle and build which isn't affected as much. Sadako has a lot of potential playstyles. She's a very jack-of-all-trades killer. I see that now. You don't need to restrict yourself to one approach when playing her, especially when that one approach is so affected by circumstances outside your control. I'm not going to let outside circumstances burn me out on my favorite killer. Sadako can overcome events, map dependency, broken mechanics, etc. Behavior can shove Sadako down the well and leave her weighed down by problems and glitches, but she'll climb out and do just fine. I believe in Sadako. She's strong. Like, as a person, I know she's a C-tier killer, and fixing the manifestation bugs and giving her some buffs would be very appreciated behavior. While it's been a lot of fun discovering new ways to play Sadako, part of me is still sad that I'm no longer playing her in a super faithful manner to her original appearance on screen. But I also just think it's a natural progression. It was something that needed to happen. I'm in a much healthier place with the killer role now, and just enjoying the game a lot more. It even feels like I've started playing Sadako again for the first time. I'm learning new ways to get value from her power, and be effective as a killer. I'm not here to announce that I have a new best way to play Sadako. That's not the conclusion here. I know there probably is a best way to play her somewhere out there, but I just don't need to find it. I'm much happier exploring builds and strategies and just improving at the character, rather than stagnating in the pursuit of endlessly refining one small build and playstyle in the ocean of ways that you can play Sadako. I saw a YouTube comment a while ago, I can't remember where, but it described Sadako as a very jack-of-all-trades killer. She's got a little bit of everything in her kit, but doesn't necessarily excel anywhere. I think I'd agree with that. And while that might be seen as a bad thing by some, to me it just means I've got a lot of potential playstyles to discover and refine. I'm very much looking forward to continuing to improve and learn more about maining Sadako in Dead by Daylight. So far, I've touted optimism and hopefulness. I've shared how, despite the constant cycle of game modes that punish Sadako for just existing, I will no longer let them impact my enjoyment of the character. I've talked about how I've been exploring different ways to play the character, and have been having fun experimenting with a myriad of playstyles, rather than the one build I'd let myself become stagnant in for a whole year. This is all good, and I do want to hold on to this, but ultimately, it is all just talk, without any opposition to put it into practice. Recently, I got my chance to put it into practice. I started writing this script in January. It is now February. And you see, a little thing happened in February. I look back on the optimistic and hopeful person I was 1 month ago, and yearn to return to it, for it is now dead, and 2v8 killed it. 2v8 is a game mode which I do not think needs an introduction. If you play DBD, you know about it. This February saw the event's third iteration, a Resident Evil version. I have a lot of friends that like Resident Evil, and were overjoyed to see this happen. I am happy for them. I am envious of them, for I am cold and numb. 2v8, as you can expect, has its usual problems. The killer queue times are long, the survivor gameplay is dull and lacks unique gameplay. Despite this, everyone is playing 2v8. Well, I'm not. I want to play Sadako. As I hope I've made it clear in this video, Sadako is pretty much the only reason I still play this game. I play it to play as Sadako, and you can't play Sadako in 2v8. Heck, I don't even know how she would work in 2v8. Regardless, I'm now stuck in the normal queues, while most other casual players are playing the event queues, because it's, well, the event. Why wouldn't you play it? Earlier in this video, I said that a split queue just causes your games to feel more sweaty. After this 2v8, I've slightly adjusted my stance. Now, I am of the opinion that games don't feel more sweaty, they just are. The first day of 2v8, I played Sadako all afternoon in the regular queue, and didn't get any higher than a 2k, even once. I ran fun chase builds, anti-heal builds, and hex builds that I'd grown accustomed to running over the past month, and my win rate had been averaging more like 70 to 80%. So to suddenly drop to 0% this first day of the event, my at best 2 pitiful kills, usually coming from tunneling one survivor out and then camping another in endgame, felt pretty bad. Now, I'm not oblivious to how this may just come off as a skill issue, but I don't know. As someone with close to 1,500 hours in the game, an intermediate player by most standards, I kinda expected to win at least one game, even if my main is a low-tier killer. I don't think I just suddenly got worse at Sadako, I'm just playing against more competent opponents all of a sudden. Which, to clarify, isn't a bad thing, just a shock to the system. After all my hope for the future and fun build experimentation, were all those builds I'd been making in January actually just terrible? What's going on? Am I just bad at the game? Without good opponents, none of these questions that pushed me forward as a player would have happened. So what do you think happens with my new willingness to explore perks I wouldn't have previously considered, when I'm now suddenly finding myself in a more sweaty environment where I feel like I'm struggling to measure up to my opponents? You may remember a little comment I made earlier in the video. Something about not running gen slowdown perks. Turns out, going against survivors with thousands of hours more than you in this game, who are more than prepared to loop an M1 killer with little to no chase potential, is kind of hard. And running gen slowdown perks makes that a more reasonable task. I run gen slowdown perks now. I never thought this is a place I would find myself in, but then again, I thought I'd found my perfect Sadako build, and we all saw the humbling character development that resulted from that. So I'm not really surprised by anything now. When I started learning killer, I watched a few general guides for the role rather than killer-specific guides, since Sadako guides are either few and far between or just outdated. Anyway, the common theme I picked up from them was don't run gen slowdown when you're starting out, as you will find yourself carried by your perk choices early on, and later find yourself in an inflated MMR that you never developed the skills to compete with. In a rather misguided notion, I took this to mean that running gen slowdown at any skill level is a sign that your wins are in some way less valid, due to you just running strong perks. Now, I wasn't struggling in January while running builds like Fire Up, Coup de Grace, Bamboozle, and Brutal Strength. Sure, I'd lose occasionally, but I've been playing Sadako for 2 years now, and with my recent shift in playstyle, I can hold my own against an average solo queue lobby. But during 2v8, when it feels like I'm going against coordinated squads bringing strong items every match, yeah, I kinda feel like that's a sign for me to start bringing my own strongest stuff too. And for killers, that's Gen Slowdown, not 4 chase perks. I'm sure if I mained a higher tier killer like Blight, Twins, Spirit, etc., I could manage with a bit more build diversity, even during sweatier times like during events. But in maining a killer who is generally agreed upon to be C tier by the community, I no longer feel bad about running strong perks. When lobbies cool off again, I'll adjust my own build accordingly. Sometimes I have to run pain res now. And honestly, it's led to some new experiences that just feel really good. Hitting like 3 or 4 gens at once with Surge is just amazing. Speaking of perks, let's talk about what I'm running now. At the start of the event, I went all in Scorched Earth and ran 4 slowdown. Think Pain Res, Surge, Deadlock, and Pop, which was honestly kind of an overreaction to what was realistically just an unlucky afternoon I had to start off the event. Now that I've calmed down, I've been finding myself running a good balance of chase, info, and slowdown. A build I've been really enjoying recently is Coup de Grace in order to help out in chase. This perk can just really help out when you manifest mind game at loops and manage to gain some distance on the survivor, but just need that extra oomph to beat them to the pallet. Next, I run Friends till the end to make sure that after hooking a survivor, I can maintain momentum by getting right back into chase with another survivor. I personally like Friends over other hooking-based info perks like Chili or Alien Instinct, because it has no distance or injury requirements. Even if you hook the Obsession, a ping still goes off. Honestly, I'd still run Friends even if it didn't have the exposed effect, because I think the reliable info is just that good. But since you can jump out of TVs with a speed burst, you are able to capitalize on the exposed a surprising amount. It just synergizes with Sadako really well. Previously, since I hooked so little, I didn't even really consider running hook perks, so I never discovered synergies like this. And Friends is a perk that synergizes big with Sadako's kit. Speaking of perks that synergize well with Sadako, my next perk I like to run is Surge. Sadako is an M1 killer, so she'd already work well with Surge anyway, but since she also can crawl out of TVs that spawn next to gens, a lot of unexpected downs can happen right next to generators, leading to a lot of Surge procs, where other M1 killers would just get led away from the generator once survivors realize it's in play. The final perk is kinda a wild card, but in the current climate, I like running a second slowdown perk. My go-to has been Deadlock, since it's just so passive. It slows down the tempo of matches without me having to really think, which helps me stay relaxed while playing. All in all, this is just a very comfortable build for me. The slowdown helps keep the game going at a comfortable pace, the chase perk helps me just not feel helpless, and it has info which keeps me going from place to place without losing momentum. I'm sure I will continue to evolve on this build, but for now, it's cozy and I like running it. And this is a build I was able to arrive at because I no longer let preconceived notions hold me back as a player. And yeah, I don't think I have much else to say. I think I have a much more realistic approach to Sadako compared to a few months ago. I'm not going to be some godlike 10,000 hour player who can beat high hour Swifts with my low tier main and 4 chase perks. I used to hold the opinion that any match was beatable if you play it right. And, well, yeah, I still kinda think that's true. I just don't think winning those situations are realistically achievable for most players, like myself for example. These past couple months have been a lot of working through limitations I'd subconsciously placed on myself early on in my time playing Dead by Daylight. Notions I'd let become cemented that were holding me back as a player, and making the game less fun for me as a result. I'm still working through them, and I will always have areas to improve, but I'm happy with the more varied trajectory that improvement is now going. I'm just having a good time playing Sadako. She's my main, and I think she's really cool. Wow, that's everything. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you for watching. This was kinda a weird video to make, to be honest. It's just me talking about my development as a killer main. I didn't know if I should even make it. I didn't know if a video like this would be helpful or entertaining to anyone. I mean, I hope it's something, but ultimately, I just had a good time making it, which was a good enough reason to make the video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I've got another Sadako video planned, so keep an eye out if you're interested, but that's it, I think. Bye for now.
Closing eyes, my room is full of tigers and that want my heart. Need it's humid, I am full of spiders. Bite me until it's painful. I sit lonely, it's dark and hopeless. Will my body still be useful? I'm ashamed of all I am now. Make me cry until it's painful. You smell of the rose, I smell of you, so I want you. I'm ashamed of